pain and hatred. And, you know, I was reading about how Zubin Mehta, who you've also worked with, had once taken the Israel Philharmonic into the fields of Lebanon and played the music, and these Lebanese farmers just spontaneously came up and embraced the musicians. And that's the power of music. And so, if you can talk a little bit about that, sir.
Namaste, and it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for the introduction, Namita ji. And music, generally, any art form, when people come to listen or see, they forget the differences. They appreciate the art as it is, especially in abstract art form. As far as music is concerned, there are concerts where sometimes when you play, one of the instances like typically when there was a 40th year of India's celebration, where I was asked to perform with Lord Menuhin. There were all the ambassadors before the concert, you know, Indian ambassadors sitting next to Pakistani ambassador and different ambassadors. Some of the countries politically, diplomatically were in different opinions. They were all sitting there. All of a sudden, when the concert was over, everybody stood up and everybody was cheering up and talking. At that moment, the differences and the definition of borders, everything was forgotten. This is the character of the music. And I think even Daniel Barenboim, he did something like that, where I brought, you know, a lot of Arab musicians to play in different places. So there are many cases where different musicians from different parts of the world have performed together, and audiences are coming to listen to that, not because one person is from one place or the other person is the other place, because of the music. I think this is one of the most important soft powers is culture. Wherever you go, you know, when there's a concert, people like the music, they come. They are not thinking who is performing, which country they are from. That becomes a secondary thing. So music has the characteristic of coming above the resilience and bringing people together, bring people of different cultures, different thoughts, different divisions to be on the same place and enjoy a common thing.
So true. By the way, I'm not sure how many of you all know this, but Sri Subramanyam had started out in the medical profession and then moved over to music. Of course, he comes from a legendary family of musicians and had also trained under his father, Sri Lakshmi Narayana. But I wonder if you can tell us why you chose to do medicine and then why you chose to leave it and keep the family legacy going.
Well, you know, during my father's time, around that time, violin was basically an accompanying instrument. You have to play with somebody. It didn't have a solo status, basically because the technique and also the approach to the violin was not solo technique, solo approach. It was basically accompanying technique. So accompanying technique is different than solo technique. It's like playing in a chamber orchestra or a string quartet, or playing with as a soloist in front of 80-piece symphony orchestra. It's a totally different approach. So my father always dreamt about bringing Indian violin to the global stage. Then he realized technically we have to develop a lot more and different techniques so that we can attract even the Western audiences, instead of them thinking, oh, they are playing ethnic or folk music sitting on the floor. Because our tradition, we sit on the floor and perform normally when we play classical. So the general thought in the West that time was, oh, they are playing ethnic music or, you know, folk music sitting on the floor. This is not classical. Only Western classical music was classical. That was the thought around that time. So he wanted to change the thing and make people realize, because Indian classical music is one of the oldest and most important scientifically developed musical systems. Originally, it all developed from Vedas. Around 12th century, we had Mughal invasion. It took some of the Persian influences and branched into two different beautiful classical traditions. But continuing the older tradition, scientifically they created 76 Melakarta, 72 parent scale, derived from that millions of scales. So his idea was to create a lot of original technique which was not there at the time in any other system. So when we play, they will start hearing and treating as classical musicians, not as a folk ethnic musicians. So also, musicians had a lot of problem at that time being an accompanying musicians. If you play well and if you get more attention, next concert probably you may not be called because the main artist doesn't want the limelight to be shared, which is a natural psychology of human being. So he said, let us develop a technique and create a solo style of playing. So he worked very hard. At the time, he got a job in Sri Lanka as a visiting professor. He sat there for many years, developed a lot of technique. In 1958, there was a big riot. They were killing all Indians and Tamils in Sri Lanka during Bandaranaike time. So we all came back, but literally as refugees, we lost everything and came back to Chennai. So at the time, father said also it is better to have an education because my elder sisters were singing. My elder brother Vaidyanathan was playing full-time music. He said, one of you at least have some education so that with education you can try to reach better audiences and convince other people about our tradition. I like science, so I went to medical college, became a medical doctor and registered as a general practitioner. But around the fourth year, my father made me to play in front of a German violinist. So he spoke to my father and said he has a great potential. If he carries the violin, he can become one of the greatest violinists. Why don't you send him to Europe to do a master's degree? I will pay all the scholarship. I will travel. We will perform together. I got very, very excited. I told my mother, next thing was that I'm quitting medicine on the fourth year, going to go and play in Germany and take my master's in music. But thankfully, my mother said, nothing doing. You finish your medicine, finish the house urgency, get the piece of paper, then whatever you want to do, it's fine. But dropping out at the fourth year, then you'll be at 10th or 12th grade, pre-university, certificate. So she said, you have to complete. So I waited 2 years. That was the time I decided I'll go and do my master's in music. But what I wanted to do was to do a lot of compositions which will bring Indian music to a mainstream. That was my focus.
Beautiful. She was a tiger mom. So, before we start talking about the fusion, I think let's listen to one of the clips which really sort of displays the kind of extraordinary fusion elements. By the way, Kishori Amonkar had once said that what is all this fusion? It's only leading to confusion. But I think Sri Subramanyam has really sort of like countered that by so seamlessly bringing the music together. So can we listen to a clip? Sir, can you talk about what you think is the one element that prevents fusion from becoming confusion? And this would apply, I guess, to music, to food, to fashion, but what is that one element according to you, the secret ingredient? And perhaps you could even talk a little bit about the main difference between Western classical and Indian classical music in that process.
One of the main things has been people, if they want to collaborate with other musicians in other systems, it'll be always good to know the other system and also learn more about the other artists, their strength, their weaknesses, and how we can bring things together. There's some of the great classical performers in our classical tradition who never did any fusion before, including Pandit Jasraj and Kishore. Once I had a concert in NCPA. It was a fusion concert, and somebody suggested, why don't you invite Pandit Jasraji also to collaborate? And we have done a lot of Jugalbandis, North-South Jugalbandis. In fact, even within Indian tradition, Jugalbandis between North and South started with Ustad Ali Akbar Khan and myself. We did it in Lincoln Center in 80s. Before that, either they did separately, Vilayat Khan Sahab or, Bismillah ji played together, Ravi ji and Arik Baji played together. But playing two different soloists, playing that tradition was created in US between me and Ustad Ali Akbar Khan Sahab. We traveled, we recorded. Subsequently, a lot of classical musicians got fascinated. Literally every classical musician subsequently did collaborated with somebody or other. When it came to Pandit Jasraji, when he said hesitantly, he said, I'll come, let me do something, free everything. But once we started playing, I said, Panditji, you start singing. I had an electric bass, drums, guitar, everything. He went on singing. Because he got into it, finally, the mood, the music, the emotion takes over. That is one way. Kishore also once told me that, why don't we do something together? She wanted me to send some tapes pre-recorded. Then he said we can talk about it and do something, because she knew I was doing with Jasraji, I was doing with other classical musician things. The most important thing is to have an open mind. Second thing, to know the other system. If a lot of people, if I know only Indian classical music, I play some melody, a Westerner, just write it in Western notation, give it to a Westerner to play. The other party doesn't have any knowledge about raga, the ornamentation, emotion of the scale. Whenever we say raga, even though it is based on a scale, there are many, many layers which makes it a raga. There are primary notes, which has to be emphasized more than the secondary notes. There are typical ornamentation. A familiar audience, just playing a little phrase, immediately they'll say, oh, this is Yaman, this is Todi, this is Bhairavi. So there are typical ornamentation, typical phrases. So like that Westerners will not know. So if you write and give, they will play the note. Similarly, a Western line is given to an Indian, he won't know the harmonic approach. So he will just play the notes. So it will always help if whoever want to collaborate, they know, especially if they are the writers of the composition, they should know the other system, which will help them to, otherwise it will be oil and water.
Can we listen to another clip that demonstrates this kind of collaborative music? That is legendary. Sir, can you tell us a little bit about this encounter that you had with Yehudi Menuhin, and also the fact that, you know, Yehudi Menuhin already had like this amazing relationship with India, and how you met, what happened, a little bit about that.
Lord Menuhin was a friend of India. He was fascinated by yoga, and his yoga teacher, B.K. Iyengar, because he had some physical problems during later part of his life for playing and everything. So that through yoga he overcame all the difficulties and continued thing. I met him, I was invited to play in Bonn for one of the concerts where he was, they were celebrating his 70th birthday, and it was a television show. As soon as we finished playing, he just came to the stage and hugged me and said, you know, I never heard powerful playing like that, we should collaborate. You know, he was much senior, belongs to my father's generation. My father used to say, whenever you want to bring our Indian violin to that level, go and listen to Menuhin, listen to Stefan Grappelli, go and listen to major orchestras, see how we can bring it. So I knew Menuhin even before I left India. So I was really thrilled and happy that it's happened. Subsequently, I was asked to perform for the 40th year of India's independence in the United Nations in New York in 1987. So they also said it'll be nice, let Menuhin play one half and you play one half, it'll be nice. So they tried to reach him. His secretary said he was not available. He was not free. So then I was asked by the Consul General, can you please talk to him, secretary? I said, he has a management. He has, in the West, everybody has their own management, their own record company. It is all very methodical. You don't just bypass the management and call unless, you know, very rare cases. So I said, I'll try and leave a message to the manager, but I can't promise anything. So I left a message. The next thing, I get a call. The manager immediately said he's traveling, he's not free that day. So I conveyed the message, that it's not going to happen. The next day, I got a call. Then said, suddenly the other side said, Maestro, how are you doing? I got a shock. In those days, no mobile phone. It's only this dial phone. So I said, I heard that you wanted me to do something. What do you like to do? I said, this is a celebration for India's 40th year. I will be playing. They want you also to play, but all the logistics, the Indian embassy will talk to you. He said, no, if you're doing it, give me the date, I'll come. I'll do it. I don't want anything else, I'll come and do it. So I said, I'll ask the Indian embassy to coordinate your travel and hotel and all that. He said, no, I don't want anything, we'll do it together. Then next thing he said, why not we play it together? I'll play alone, you play alone, we should play together. I said, what do we play together? Because there are a lot of Bach pieces written for two violins, Vivaldi's and other great composers in the 16th, 17th century have written for two violins. He said, no, I want you to write a piece which I want to learn and play. So I got really a shock. So just overnight, I have to sit and write a piece. Then I sent it to him. So we had a rehearsal in the New York consulate the day of the concert. And he said, I really like your jibba. So I said, I don't have a new jibba. I have another one dry clean. He said, can I borrow it? So he was also wearing the jibba. And we played that. You see the collaboration, how beautifully he played. I mean, he's one of the greatest violinists in the West, in the history. And very open-minded, friend of India. But immediately he said, let us do something together. I want to learn and do something. That kind of openness was there. And if you see that raga I selected was Mohanam Bhupali, which is one of the typical Indian ragas, which is also common in jazz, common in Chinese music, every music. So the essence of even though he doesn't know it is this particular raga, when he plays the phrases and things like that, he gets the essence. That is because of musicianship. He didn't sit and listen to the raga, learn about the raga. But a musician is in that level, subconsciously, intuitively, they can get to that level and collaborate and do things. This is one of the most memorable things for me. Subsequently, we did a lot of things. And when I started my Lakshminarayana Global Music Festival in memory of a father, he was the first patron, him, Stefan Grappelli. And there's another gentleman, Mr. Peter Brooks. He did Mahabharata for 9 hours, a brilliant theater production he did about India. So these are the three people who were the patrons.
Do you have any memory of the work you've done with George Harrison?
It was in 1975 when I went to US. I was very homesick. I finished all the requirement in 9 months, and I want to come home. Then my father said, if you come home, you won't have your MA degree. Another thing I have to sideline and say that when I went and asked for the MA degree, they asked me, where is your bachelor's degree? Then I remembered my mother. Oh, thank God she asked me to finish it. Otherwise, I wouldn't got that MA degree. When I did my PhD, they asked for both bachelor's and master's degree. So if I didn't listen to my mother, I wouldn't have got any of these things, education-wise, the piece of paper which is needed. But in any case, with George, it was like, at the time, I want to go back to India. At the time, Raviji met my father in Chennai and said, I'm doing a major tour. George is doing it. And some places, George is going to be performing in US. Europe, it is going to be a group of Indian musicians. There was Alarakaji was there, Hariji, Shivji, Sultanji. We were all there, and I was featured as a soloist. So he told my father, if your son can come for this tour, I'll feature him as a soloist, South Indian soloist. Then I told my father, when I want to go back to India, the dean said, if you go back to India, you won't get the certificate. Then you have to come back 1 year later, give a just short performance, get the certificate. Otherwise, I'll give you a better offer. Why don't you stay here and teach as a faculty 9 months? I'll give you a salary so you can finish it and go. So I told my father, this word. He said, yeah, it's better. Otherwise, for us to come back, we were not from we were from a very low middle class family. Financially, we were not very well off. So coming back and buying another ticket, getting a visa, and go back to US to get a piece of paper was not very practical. My father said, somehow finish it and come back. That was the time this tour offer came. So I told my father that Dean has given me a job. If I tell him I want 4 months leave now, he's not going to be happy out of 9 months, 4 months leave. He said, why don't you talk to him? So I went and talked to Nick England. He was the dean at that time. He said, how can you ask for 3-4 months leave now? You have just given your, even before you finish your MA, you are a faculty, you are teaching your own colleagues and things like that. And it will be difficult. I said, who are you going with any case? I said, it is George Harrison sponsoring, all the Indian musicians, Ravi Shankar, family and friend. Oh, he said, please go, but one condition, wherever you go, you say you are from California Institute of Arts, you are a faculty there. So that George Harrison name and Raviji name opened the door. So I went on the tour. And US, George played the second half with his own group, and we collaborated. The first half is all Indian musicians, with Raviji doing it. We brought few albums. One of the earliest concerts was in Royal Albert Hall in London. We started the tour where I played Carnatic violin, Raviji played Hindustani music. Then we all collaborated. So it's one of the most memorable tours.
What an extraordinary sort of background and story. And despite that, I think this is a good time to tell the story that Bachi told me while we were driving up to Kasoli yesterday, which is that when Bachi was heading the Bangalore Times of India, I think it was at the launch that they were trying to get L. Subramaniam to perform, and she was chatting with the person on the other side who's the head of management, and there was another gentleman in the room, and both of them were just kind of banter. The gentleman was just sitting there quietly, and Bachi said, how will we get him? It's so difficult, he's so big and he's so important and he must be so expensive, how will we manage? And the person who was sitting in the room said, it will happen. And she said, and I think she ignored him and she just carried on saying it'll be impossible and we have to find somebody else. And then the person said, no, don't worry, it will happen. And finally she just turned to him and said, who are you? And he said, I'm L. Subramanyam. So I think we all, especially all us young people, really need to learn about what the value of humility. Sir, I wanted to talk to you also about how you're like the family Von Trapp of India, because I mean, you've performed, you've played with all your children, granddaughter, wife, and I want to know a little bit more about how that process worked, because family dynamics can be so complicated, and there's emotional issues involved and other issues involved, and of course the musical synchronicity that has to happen. So how did that all sort of work out? And it's so beautiful. I mean, we're going to listen to a clip shortly of the families playing together, in fact, with Rahman's family and children. But can you talk a little bit about that?
You know, one common thing which binds us together is music. We all love music. We all love to play music, sing. Some of the members sing. My wife is one of the most extraordinary singers. And she has sung, I think, 20, 30,000 film songs in Bollywood and things like that. Earlier, Viji, my first wife, she was also very, very musical. Unfortunately, she had a brain tumor and she passed away in 1995. So then I moved to India after that. After that, I wanted my children to learn music. We were indirectly or directly telling them, you know, whether you become a musician or not, music is in our family, in our tradition. It is, you know, our legacy, my father's legacy. So whatever you become, just learn music. So slowly, my daughter was very interested in music. She studied as an education. She became a lawyer, then switched over to music. And she's heading the SAPA, Subramaniam Academy of Performing Arts, where they're teaching close to 40,000 children are learning about music in different schools there. My younger son also, I kind of have to force him. Initially, it was because whenever you ask children to sit and practice, it is a little bit of a tricky thing. They said, I don't want to become a musician because who wants to sit and practice 4 hours, 3 hours a day when you're young? So one of the short thing I'll tell you about my younger son, Ambi, I wanted him to play the violin and continue because my eldest son, he sings very well. Then he wanted to become a doctor. I couldn't say no to him because he said, Appa, you are a doctor. Why shouldn't I become a doctor? So I said, do whatever you want. So he's an head and neck surgeon, one of the leading surgeons in head and neck cancer. He's heading one of the hospitals in Bangalore, Sparsh Hospital. His name is Narayana. So my younger son, at least I wanted him to play the violin. So when I told him he had to sit and practice, one day he told me, no, I don't want to become a musician. I've decided. He was very young, I think 8 or 9, something like that. So I picked up the violin and put it in one of the top of the almara so he cannot reach. After a couple of days, I told him, you know, as long as I'm here, you will have a roof, you'll have food and everything. If something happens to me, you won't have a roof, you won't have food, so you have to do something. So I'll suggest 2 things which would be useful. I used to have a very, very nice car driver called Das. He used to come at 8 a.m. in the morning. Even if I tell him 5 o'clock he can go home, he'll say, no, sir, after you go to bed, I'll go. He used to just sit there around. I said, look, go to Das and he will teach you how to drive the car. So later on, you can either become a driver. He will also teach you, you know, he used to bring coconuts. I used to ask, how did you get it? He said, in my garden I have coconuts, so I used to climb up and get it, he said. So I told him, learn how to pick up coconuts. So only thing you have to be, so you can have coconuts, you can drive car, you can have your own, you know, place. Otherwise, you won't have a place, you won't have food. Only thing when you climb coconut trees, you have to be aware because there may be monkeys fighting for the same coconut. Whoever is strong will stay there. Whoever is weak will be on the floor. 2 days later, he said, Appa, I've decided I want to become a violinist. So, well, telling positive thing. I mean, he has worked so hard since then. I should tell that also. He really used to work many, many hours because then I used to play with him in a lot of concerts, but I never used to plan what I'm playing. For him, it was always a challenge because suddenly, you know, playing different ragas, different composition, different complex thing. It was like on the spot learning and training and performing. So he has been like that. My daughter after that she did songwriting in Berkeley and things like that. She did higher studies in UK for law, but she left everything. She's a full-time singer, songwriter, running the SAPA. My granddaughter, I've been kind of pushing her to become a musician. She's an excellent singer. She sings with me and plays with me. Coming to Kavita, 1999 we got married because I was working on 2 projects. One was a global fusion album for Warner Brothers, where the idea was to take 5 continents, artists from different continents, and create something based on Indian tonality so we can put the Indian map globally so that all the 5 continents will get familiar sounds of the compositions and Indian music. So we had people from Australia, didgeridoo, and different things. From India, I want a fantastic singer. So I asked one of my friends to send a series of tapes So they sent me a lot of tapes. I heard a lot of tapes from Bollywood. And one particular singer, I really liked the voice and the range and emotion because she was singing not only, item songs, most difficult songs, romantic songs, and emotional songs, bhajans. So it was a variety of, I think what I was looking for, something different, not romantic song or not item song, something global fusion, which is challenging and improvising. So I selected that. I was also working on a film at that time. Initially, she said, I've never done fusion. I said, doesn't matter, we'll work it out. We can. So we met like that. I started working in a studio. The first day when the recording, we were doing it in Bangalore. It was partly, I told her what the composition gave, everything. I went to the studio and we started recording. Within half an hour, she knew what to sing, and I told her, just improvise. These are the changes, these are the chords. Because in film music, everything is written. They write the song, everything is orchestra is arranged. Those days, it was all live recording, with full orchestra, even if there's 100 musicians. They sit, practice, then the singer comes, do one or two rehearsals with the music director, and do the whole song. Now the whole thing is different. No, everybody comes and sing one line. That two part of the line, they edit it, computer, AI, technology, everything. You don't really have to sing the whole song. You do words and then patch it up and think. Those days, you have to sing the whole thing. That also had a different emotional approach when you sing a whole song as a duet with the full orchestra. If you make mistake, they have to redo the whole thing. So in any case, so with the studio, we went to the studio, started recording, I had a call. One of my friends has come, he urgently wanted to meet me. So I didn't know what to do because the recording had started. He said, urgently want to meet. It was Raja. She was in Bangalore. Raja, one of the very well-known composer, Raja. So I told her, I just have to go for a short time and come. So I went, it took more than an hour and things like that. When I came back, she has finished the song. Then she said, I've finished, want to hear it, anything has to be redone, we'll redo it. We listened to it. That's how we started our collaboration. Since then, subsequently, I started writing major orchestral compositions like Bharat Symphony, which is the history of India for the 70th year of India's independence, which we subsequently performed in different places for Indian voice, choir, and full symphony orchestra. We recorded ultimately with the London Symphony, Bharat Symphony, Mahatma Symphony, different things. So she also openly started collaborating other than the fusion thinking with, Herbie Hancock or George Duke or Stanley Clarke, different fusion pieces, the orchestral thing which also fascinated her, and she did a tremendous contribution to make this orchestral work much more accessible to many, many people, because when there is a lyrics, there is a song, one of the thing had a lot of lyrics from, Vaishnava Janato, for example, and Rabindranath Tagore's things like that. So vocal also added a lot of things, and she was very open. So ultimately, we started doing with the entire family fusion thing. The last concert we did was recently in Bombay.
At NMACC.
NMACC. With the entire family, we all performed.
Can we listen to a clip? Actually, there are two clips, one with Kavita Krishnamurthy and the next one with the children, which I think is with Rahman and his children as well. What a treat. Can we hear the next clip as well? Sir, can you talk a little bit, to get back to the book, about the broad difference between the Western way, the Western classical music and Indian classical music, in terms of both technique and the underlying philosophy, which is so interesting because Western classical music essentially follows discrete notes, which I suggest would be because Western philosophy is based on more rational thinking, whereas Indian philosophy is so based on the unseen and the sort of micro notes, the things that coil around the notes. So can you talk about both in the context of this book and what you're hoping to achieve by bringing them all together? It's a little complicated, but before we end.
I'll try to do that. One, in Western music, whenever we think about Western music, it's not only linear, but there is multiple tonalities you hear at the same time. When you hear an orchestra, they play different instruments, play different sounds and different notes at the same time, thereby creating a tonality which they call it harmony. So there are multiple tonalities being heard, and there's a vertical movement and a linear movement. In an orchestra, generally in a symphony orchestra, there are woodwinds like, flute, oboe, clarinet, bassoon, then horns, there are French horns, trumpet, tuba, and then percussion, then strings. In strings, we have first violin, second violin, viola, cello, and bass. So whenever a composer writes a composition for an orchestra, he's tried to think about different instrumentation, what might sound good for in which instrument. So he has to think all those things, write a composition. So it is more of a vertical approach most of the time. Whereas in Indian music, it is more of a linear approach. also the reason is we have microtones. We have Western system based on tempered notes. In a piano, keyboard, it is tuned in a tempered system. So you hear a minor second, it's a minor second. Whereas in Indian music, a note can be even lesser than a minor second or slightly more than a minor second, depending on the raga. So if we say a small re or minor second in a particular raga, that particular raga, one of the raga, the minor re, a second degree, will be even close to the sa, which is the tonic, a little more than the minor second, little closer to the major, minor third or major second. So there are differences because of the tonality. So we believe there are 22 microtones, Shruti, in an octave. So whenever you play certain ragas, to bring the emotion, color, and also the flavor of the raga, one has to know these tonalities, especially if you are playing a raga which has microtones. If you say you're playing Todi, or which we call it Subhamantrali, there are second degree and fourth degree. These are all microtones. You cannot just play minor second and augmented fourth, and it doesn't become that particular raga. We will be playing the notes of the raga. Even though musically, wherever you go, there are basically 7 notes, which expands into 12 notes. These 7 notes is interpreted differently, played differently because of different culture, different emotion, different presentation. It all sounds differently. So if anybody plays an open string in a violin, we cannot say what tradition. It could be jazz, it could be Western classical, it could be rock, it could be pop, country fiddle, or anything. But when they start playing a phrase, immediately, if Menuhin plays Western classical music with a vibrato or trill or anything, there's a different thing than Stefan Grappelli playing in a jazz style, sliding and interpreting it differently, same melody. We have had compositions where I had the great pleasure of playing with both Menuhin and Grappelli, where the interpretation of the same melodies in Indian classical and Western classical and jazz, visibly you can see that, hear it. So there are differences. But when you write an orchestral thing, my whole idea was in early 80s, I did the friend of mine who believed that I can do wonders, he said, you have to write an orchestral piece. I said, if I write writing an orchestral piece takes a long time, 6 months minimum, because it's not like you write a melody and ask somebody else to orchestrate it. If you're a composer, like in the West, Beethoven wrote all the notes, Bach wrote all these notes, Mozart wrote all the notes. He didn't write the melody and somebody didn't arrange it. That used to happen a lot in the film industry, in Bollywood industry. Somebody write a melody, they had an arranger, they did everything. But when you say you're writing an orchestral piece, you have to write yourself. So I said, I don't want to sit 6 months and write a piece and finally you say, it's not good enough, you don't want to play. Because I had a friend of mine who was a PhD from Yale University, one of the most brilliant guys. He wrote many pieces, and one day he took me to his house and said, Mani, all these pieces I've written for orchestra, I'm not getting a single orchestra to play any pieces. And I don't have the finance to hire the orchestra, unless the orchestra convince they don't want to play. So with that background, I said, I don't want to write 6 months and do something. Then this particular person who was a Sati Sai Baba devotee, Richard Bach, he produced, M.S. Subbulakshmi, Alek Pakan, Ravi Shankar, all those, lot of artists were produced by him at that. He did release a lot of albums with them, World Pacific Records. He said, you write, we guarantee we will play. So we met the conductor. So I had the conductor, the same thing. If I write after 6 months, you say, it's not good enough. And I don't know what I'll do because I've never written an orchestral piece. He said, your friend says you are a genius, you write whatever it is, I guarantee, whatever it is, I'll play, whether I like it or not. That was the guarantee given. So I wrote, and ultimately after the first rehearsal, I don't know what happened, he said, no, this cannot be the opening piece, we will make it the closing piece. I wrote a double concerto for violin and flute, and I had a fantastic flute player, Hubert Laws. He was one of the topmost jazz flute player, classically trained. He used to play with New York Philharmonic. He's from Juilliard, I think. He's one of the greatest flute players. I wrote for violin and flute. So that piece was performed. Next thing I knew was Maestro Mehta was in Los Angeles. He said, I want to talk to you. I came. That was the time my mother just died for 1 week before, something like that. He came and said, I want you to write another piece. I said, again, another 6 months. I said, I have already a piece written with a fantastic flute player. He already knows the piece. we can get this another classical player who was interested in playing the piece first. There used to be a very famous flute player, Jean-Pierre Rampal. He was there. So we can try to. He said, no, I want you to write your only violin solo piece with you, and we will premiere it 4 days. Whatever you write, we'll play 4 days with New York Philharmonic to celebrate India. So at that time, my father and brother said, elder brother Vaidyanathan said, why are you thinking twice and giving all the excuses? You should do it because ultimately, you know where you're going to take our Indian violin. The hundreds of people are going to be behind you playing, and Zubin has been conducting. So this will bring our music to a different, region and different platform. So I did Fantasy on Vedic Chants. That was, next year I was asked to play the same piece in Moscow when Venkatraman, our president, then president, and the Moscow president. So slowly a lot of orchestras asked me to write pieces. It was not my desire to do. I just wanted to play violin and write with the chamber groups and play with different people like Menu and Grappelli and things like that. Since this commission started coming and saying that this is for the opening of the festival, closing of the festival, or meeting of the two presidents, things like that, my father said, we should do this. So finally, when I went to Moscow, one of the professors, they said, your harmony is totally different, but yet very powerful and pleasing. What is the secret? If you can stay here, write a thesis on the harmony, how you did arrive at it is not a conventional thing, what we learned, but yet it is very powerful and I love it, people love it. So can you give a thesis? And he said, I'll give you a PhD. He was tempting me, saying, I'll give you a PhD if you stayed there. And that was a time in Moscow, when I was, it was minus 35 degrees. So I was shivering. I said, I want to get back to Los Angeles, where my family was. I said, thank you very much. He said, at least stay here a few months, write a thesis. I said, no, sir, very kind of you, but I can't stay here. And I went back. That gave me the idea. So ultimately, when I started doing a lot of orchestral pieces, everybody used to say, can you tell us what it was? What is different? So at that time, I decided I'll write the secret and the whatever way to approach using only Indian ragas, writing big symphony orchestras, which is played all over the world. So we have done over 250 performances with all the major orchestras using the raga harmony. Then I decided I'll write the book, but if you write a book, everybody says, oh, he's a known guy, so you write a book, people say it's great. But I wanted to do it as a PhD thesis so that it'll be scrutinized by other composers, other musicians. Then you have to defend yourself. I'm sure you all know in a PhD, you don't just write a paper and give it to them. They don't publish. There will be defense. There will be question. There will be, people will be curious. So I said, let me do it properly so that it will be vetted by a lot of other composers and people. That's how the book came, Raga Harmony. So that this is actually gives how knowing all the raga system, 72 parent scales, with that you can create any harmony which is already existing and go on creating newer harmony because of the ragas from the 72 parent scales in our Carnatic system. We can derive more than 2 million scales, derived scales. Every time you derive a scale and combine the notes, it's a different tonality. If you see the Western music, there have been different periods during Baroque period, like Handel, Bach, Vivaldi. They all do fantastic things. So after that, people who came next had to do something different to be noticed also. So then it became, classical music, then romantic period and modern music. So every 100, 150 years, people have to rethink how to keep the attraction going for music. So they all kept on changing it. So this, I thought if I do this, this can go on for a million years. So there are enough material there. That's the reason I wrote this book. And before I finished, the publisher said, a couple of publishers said, we want to publish it. I said, let me finish the book. Then my own university said, we want to publish it. I said, not to the university, it'll be only the university library. This is written for musicians and people who are interested in writing a different thing. So this has been published by Westland.
Thank you so much. And now we're going to listen to an extraordinary piece called Shanti Priya before we conclude for lunch. What a perfect way to. This was A Touch of India, played by the Oman Symphony Orchestra in Germany. So it's really about resilience and renewal. Thank you so much.
So fantastic. I shouldn't say any words and spoil the mood of it. Please, we break now for lunch.